All right, so this is our first podcast, me and DJ. We're going with the name Fist Dented Christians because we both deal with anger issues and we're both Christians. So, my name is Dustin, 35 years old. I've been struggling with a lot of mental health issues for a long time now, and I'm kind of at a point in my life where I need to start figuring stuff out and what I want to do with life. The one thing that I have realized is whatever I'm going through, I want to make sure that I'm able to help others with it. So the purpose of this is to be open and honest about my struggles and all the details that, or most of the details that go along with that, and then hopefully that either helps somebody dealing with it or hopefully it can help explain it to somebody that knows somebody that's dealing with it.
Great, thanks, Dustin. My name is DJ, and this is Fist Dented Christians, and we came up with that name because we've been meeting for a while now, and we both realize that being a Christian is hard, being a human being is hard, being a male in 2019 is hard. And so we just thought that we would like to get together and share exactly what we're going through, and maybe it might resonate with other people. I too have struggled with anger issues and trust issues. Uh, Struggled with a lot of mental health issues as it pertains to addiction. I am in recovery. I will have 5 years of sobriety September 20th this year. And so I've come through hell and high water to try to get to a place where I'm at. And I still think I'm just getting going. And it's amazing some of the things that I've seen when I was drinking, some of the things I experienced, some of the dark places that I went, some of the spiritual experiences that I had that were very, very dark. And then also some of the simple hearted contentment that sobriety brings. And it's been quite a journey, and I think it's worth sharing. And so that's why we started this podcast. So I think what we're going to do is just kind of share. And this morning we're sitting on our deck. So if you hear cars or trucks pass by, we're just sitting outside. The birds are chirping. We saw a cardinal fly by earlier, and I said to Dustin, I said, "Oh, look, it's a cardinal, and that means good luck." And it's interesting because as I said it, and we're doing this podcast, Fist Dented Christians. It's interesting because maybe another Christian would say, "Well, that's not Christianity,"
Yeah.
seeing it, but it's true, and I think it's all about mindset. But I will say, for me, God is going to try to use everything at God's disposal to communicate to us.
Yeah.
Whether it's you and me doing this podcast and somebody else hears it, or whether it's a red bird that lands on a power line, or friendships or relationships or music or the sunshine. And sometimes I've felt, and maybe you can talk to this too, but sometimes I've tried to lay that out for people that I know who are Christian, some friends in particular that I'm thinking of, and they just don't quite get it. And so Fist Dented Christians is basically this amalgamation of we're imperfect, we are searching for God as much as we can, and we want to try to get other people involved in that discussion, right?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to lay it out. Specifically to the cardinal thing, I think it's interesting that I don't think we should seek out um, like actively participate in like astrology or something like that. But I think it's interesting that in the birth of Jesus, astrology was used to get the three wise men to Jesus.
Good point.
So to your point about what God will do to get to us, I don't think there's any limit. But then I think he places some limits on us. So I had no issue with you saying that about the cardinal because I don't think you're spending your time researching what signs the universe is
Right.
going to give us. I think in that moment it was uh, potentially like God just kind of knocking on your door going, hey, this is something that you're attuned to, a
Right.
cardinal. So remember, I'm here.
Right.
So I think there are plenty of times where what we can do and what we should do, God boxes us because we don't know everything, but never put limitations on what He's going to do to reach us.
Right.
You could probably ask a Jewish person in the first century if God would become man and die for us, and they would think that's the most ridiculous thing. We know they thought that. Jesus constantly talked about that in the Bible, that to the Pharisees, I stand before you and you can't see the living word because you're so focused on what's in here. So I think that's important, and I think that um, being more open to what God can do and our surroundings, I think, is something that is super important. And I think there's been a lot of damage done by, for lack of a better term, mainstream Christianity that says to be a Christian, to commune with God, it needs to be done only this way.
Mm-hmm.
And there are so many different ways to experience God and to walk with God and to be a Christ-like disciple. So I think that that example is a good example, and I would agree that I have friends that don't understand that, and we could be wrong, but at least be open to discussing it and trying to figure it out instead of just going, no, that's not Christian.
Right.
Like
Right.
that hard line is very damaging and very closing to people and your own experiences.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think it's all about Jesus is trying to relate to us,
Yeah.
right? And so when we take this cardinal, maybe this will be the cardinal episode, but when we take the cardinal, for me, what happens, and maybe this happens for others, and if not, maybe try it, but for me, that is it's kind of a positive trigger. Okay, it's a positive trigger towards gratitude.
Sure.
And so if I see that cardinal and I think, oh, it's a cardinal, I'm going to have good luck today, it's kind of tongue in cheek, it's kind of a joke, but it is a way for me to kind of plug into God's creation.
Sure.
And there's a book I just read. I maybe could go get it. It's called "The Kingdom of God is a Party." And I think his name is Lee Forney.
Okay.
Um, and it talks about how Jesus, the Son of God, created this world for us to live in,
Yeah.
and that it should be celebrated. We
Yeah.
should be joyful.
Yeah.
And and everything that God put on this earth is there for us to sort of celebrate and be joyful in. And yet, the kind of world that we live in, and even just ourselves as humans, I think we forget that. And you brought up the Pharisees. I think the Pharisees, they didn't get it.
Yeah.
A lot of people didn't like Jesus. They
Yeah.
thought he was a fraud,
Yep.
which is kind of amazing to think about, right? Where in other parts of the Bible or Scripture, you read how he walked up to a few fishermen and asked them to just drop what they were doing and follow him,
Yeah.
and they did.
Yep.
And so it's this level of, like, it makes me think a lot of excuse me, of what was he like? Like,
Yeah.
he must have had so much charisma. He must have been the kind of human being, God incarnate, that just glowed, and you come
Yeah.
across people in your life that you just are like, wow, what is it about that person? And so I oftentimes will spend my day, especially if I'm struggling with anger or impatience or trust issues or whatever, sometimes I'll try to stop and recondition my mind to be like, hey, like, what would happen if, like, Jesus was standing in my kitchen with me right now, or if Jesus was sitting
Yeah.
in the passenger seat of my car?
Yeah.
You have a good story about that, don't you? About being in your car at a really dark time.
Yeah. So that's the kind of the first time I not kind of, definitely the first time I experienced God. I've been doing therapy for a long time for a number of mental health issues, and impulse control issues are one of them, and specifically rage. And when I was like 20, about 19 or 20 maybe, I was seeing a therapist, and he asked when I got mad, like, how I handle that. And I told him that I don't really handle it. I just let the rage run its course till I'm exhausted or I'm fine, quote unquote. So he gave me two choices. He said either count to 10 or say a prayer. I was like, okay. So I was coming home from work one day, a week later or so, and I had a really bad day at work. And for some reason in my head, all day, I was going to listen to the Black Album by Metallica. And so I get in my car and I'm leaving work and I grab the CD and I go to put it in the CD player and it spits it out. And that wasn't uncommon. My CD player was kind of junky. So the first 2 or 3 times it happened, I just expected it. It wasn't bad. Well, I put it in, like, let's say the fourth time, and it played for 5 seconds and then spit it out. So now I'm starting to get mad because now it's like taunting me. It's not just spitting it out.
Okay.
It's
So do you think maybe if we're going on the Cardinal theory,
Yeah.
maybe God doesn't want you listening to that record?
Yeah, exactly. Some Christian would tell me I'm listening to pagan music to calm myself down, and I should be in prayer or
listen to the
worship.
signs of the Lord.
Yep,
Right?
yep. So yeah, it spits it out, and I'm getting worked up, and I put it in, and
And
it's
look
this.
what happened as a
Yep.
result of that.
Oh yeah, and it was this 30-45 second process, and I just lost control. I'm swearing at the CD player. I'm calling it fucking this and fucking that, and I'm flipping it off. It's an inanimate object, and I'm just like, I'm driving down the road and I'm double fisting the middle fingers at it.
You wanted some Metallica.
Oh yeah, I needed a release, and that's what I thought was gonna do. And so I stopped for a second, and I'm like, all right, what did Pete, my therapist, what did Pete say to do? Count to 10 or pray. No, counting to 10 is stupid. It's just going to give me 10 more seconds to get worked up. So screw that noise. So I thought, okay, I'm going to pray. And at the time, I was a Christian in that I believed God existed, but I wasn't an active, participating disciple of Christ. I just, yeah, God's there, and I'm going to do my own thing, whatever. But okay, what the hell? I'll give it a shot. So I remember I don't remember the exact prayer, but it was something along the lines of, "All right, God, here's the deal. I'm super worked up, and I'm just furious at this piece of shit CD player, and all I wanted to do was listen to some Metallica. I can't even do that, and I can't calm myself down. So if you want me to calm down, then you're gonna need to do it because I can't fucking do it on my own."
Wow.
And like the second I finished that, I took this huge breath of air in, and it honestly felt like something entered my lungs. Like it felt like there was a physical thing that entered me. And I held my breath for a second or two and exhaled, and it was the calmest that I'd ever been. I went from just like wanting to pull over and just fist dent my car and just beat the shit out of everything to just super peaceful. And and I remember like I let that calm sit on me for a minute or so, and then I just kind of chuckled, and I'm like, wow, that that worked like really well. And in the moment, I didn't think about it because I didn't really have the knowledge or the words to put to it. But as I started walking with God, I'm very certain that that was like my baptism in the Holy Spirit.
Stayed with you.
Yeah, like that was the first time I really, instead of, sometimes when you pray, especially if you're a Christian that's just starting out, or you're, for lack of a better term, a non-committal Christian, you're just like, okay, God, please help me or whatever, but you don't, like, it's just, it feels more of like something you should do.
Mm-hmm.
This was the first time that I prayed out of like a desperation of I am a finite human being, and I don't understand, and I can't stop. If you don't help, it ain't getting fixed. So yeah, I look at that as like my baptism in the Holy Spirit, and that was the first time where I was like, okay, I think I need to start investigating this a little more. And then, of course, because I'm a kind of a rockhead, I'm still working
Right.
desperately at it, but that was the first time it was a real thing to me.
You know, it's interesting you bring up that breathe in God. It reminded me of I have an aunt. Her name is Noni, and she is probably as high up in the Catholic Church that you can be as a female
Okay.
that you can possibly be. And she was visiting just this last weekend from St. Louis. She runs a parish that helps the homeless and the drug addicted in St. Louis, and she's devoted her life to God. And we were talking about prayer, and I was telling her about some of my evolution with prayer. I've been I've been doing the Bible study every day and taking notes, but the most valuable part of that time in my day, when I can find time to do it, I'm not perfect by any means,
Yeah.
is praying out loud. And so I was
Sure.
explaining to her how valuable that was to pray out loud, and she was just very gracious and listening. And she says, I used to do that too, but now, Dan, DJ stands for Daniel James. She says, now, Dan, what I do is I breathe in the presence of God and then I exhale it out to the world. She goes, I'm a prayerless, or I'm a wordless prayer now. And I'm like, wow, that's kind of different. But when you just brought up your
Yeah.
experience, it makes a lot of sense. Like,
Sure.
yeah, breathe in the presence of God, and to be mindful of actually doing that. If you think about it, we're always breathing, and it ties into other things about being mindful and intentional and being present.
Yeah.
But breathing in the presence of God and then exhaling it out to the world. That's cool because that obviously stayed with you up until now.
Yeah.
How long ago was that?
I think it was. Well, I said originally 19 or 20, but really I think it was 18 or 19, and I'm 35 now, so it's been 16,
It's been a while,
17 years.
and you still remember it.
Oh yeah, and I can still remember. So I worked on at a company off of Rice Street in Maplewood, and I can still remember to get home back to Woodbury, I would go down Rice Street, I would take a left on Roselawn, and I would take a right to get onto 35 East South. And I can still remember, like, I can picture where I'm at each stage of, like, the Rage building as I go down Roselawn, and then at Roselawn, you go up a hill to get onto 35 East South, and I can remember, like, coming up over that hill and, like, that, like, going, okay, I need to slow down, and then I got on 35 East South, and that's kind of when I said the prayer, and, like, it's still vivid enough that I can, like, close my eyes and picture the drive, and, like, I can see myself putting the CD in and it kicking out, and I can see myself flipping the CD player off and all that.
Spirit, like it was a spiritual scorch mark for you. Like you still see that and feel that when you go to those places. I bet too. Huh?
Yeah, and there's times, and I think one of the other things that hopefully this podcast kind of helps people with and helps DJ and I flush out is the doubt you have with your faith in God. And there's still, at 35, I've had a few experiences, what I would say are like genuine experiences with God, where I hear His voice or I feel His presence. But I still have plenty of times where I doubt, especially in this season of my life where I'm starting to investigate social issues and all that. But that is something that I always go back to. That whatever doubt I have or whatever, that's something that I can hold on to. And sometimes it does work, and there are other times where I even doubt that. But I keep trying to, give fair weight to why I believe in God if I'm struggling with something. And that's something I can put in the category of why I believe it's a tangible thing.
Right. I work in the field of mental health, and so I'm blessed with the opportunity to meet people pretty much on a daily basis. And I have come to the conclusion, and this isn't going to be any sort of epiphany for anybody, is that we are all so screwed up, and we all have something. And I remember I had a couple, a married female couple came into my office. This is a year or two ago. And on my wall is a very old crucifix with a LGBT rainbow bracelet on top of it. So they're together. And so this married couple comes in, females, and we were talking, and I noticed they were staring straight at it, and they'd look at it, and they didn't say anything, they'd look at it. And at one point I got up to leave the room because I wanted to print something off and for them to look at, and came back in, and they were quiet, and they seemed like they were upset and angry. And so I'm like, is everything okay? And they were like, what's the deal with the rainbow bracelet on the Jesus cross? Like, what's that about? And I said, I did that purposely.
Sure.
Because from where I come from, or at least in my heart, if Jesus was in this room right now, he would be sitting with us and he would be loving you just as much as I'm trying to love you too.
Yeah.
And it was almost like you could feel the air of tension just leave the room,
Sure.
you know. And I know with the LGBT community, you know, there's this thing called scanning that they do.
Okay.
That it's just unfortunate, but I can see why it happens. Is they'll go into an environment and they'll look at the environment to see if it's safe.
Sure.
And so I knew that, and so that's why I purposely did that, because I'm a follower of Christ, but I'm also a believer that I love everybody, and that may not be the most popular opinion, you know, in Christian circles, but um, you know, we think about these things, and we think about how, you know, the purpose of this podcast is to just say, hey, you're not alone. There are so many people that I talk to
Yeah.
that you come across in your life, even personal friends that are struggling desperately with porn or with anger or with infidelity or with you know, anger issues or trust issues,
Yeah.
or just not knowing how to communicate with their spouse or their friend or their daughter or their son. And all of that, I think, ties back to our relationship with Christ.
Yeah.
And how does that look? How does the value, the spiritual virtues that being a follower of Christ, a Fist Dented Christian, how can that be used in our world so that we can live more fully animated,
Yeah.
right? We want to be fully animated. God created us to celebrate his kingdom, and yet we wake up every day and the first thing we do is look at our phones or check an email or check a text or play a game.
Yeah.
And where is it the time that we're carving out of our day to spend time with God, even if it's just sitting on your deck and seeing a Cardinal or
Yeah.
enjoying hot coffee, like just being in the presence, inhalation of the Spirit,
Yeah.
right? So as we go through this series, you know, we want to talk about different topics, and we want to talk about some of our dark experiences so people don't feel so alone. I mean, you and I have talked about this in the past. I mean, we've both thought about and had a plan for suicide, you
Right.
know, to off ourselves
Yeah.
because we just wanted it to stop. And the thing is with people who think about committing suicide, a couple of them I know personally that have tried it. I've asked them, like, what is it that made you do it? And it wasn't that they were so overwhelmed with pain and depression. It was exactly the opposite. Is I just wanted to feel something.
Oh, sure.
And my sister is one of those people who I love desperately, who she tried to commit suicide when I was in college. And I found her in a bathtub with a kitchen knife sticking out of her stomach.
Jeez.
And and I asked her years later, like, why?
Yeah.
And she says, because I just wanted to feel something.
Sure.
I wanted somebody to pay attention to me.
Yeah.
And that's the thing is we all want to feel loved and valued and connected and adored and affirmed. And I think Christ can do that for us, but we also need that on the earthly plane too,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so how can we reach out to people that are maybe just thinking about like, oh man, if I don't talk to somebody today, I'm over.
Yeah.
And so anyhow, but I just think that as we go along in this podcast, there's so many different things that we could discuss. And so today might have been a little bit all over the board, but um, do you want to share some thoughts on maybe what you see looking forward with this?
Yeah. So I
We've got
just
about
want to.
5 minutes.
Okay. Yeah. I just want to touch on something really quick. I think we both agree that we don't want to get into too much of like theological debates. That's a different podcast potentially. This is more to identify with people and figure each other or help each other figure out life. But one of the things I think going back that I wanted to touch on with the LGBT and being a Christian and all that, I think there's so many times where people think because I'm a Christian, I have to like there has to be this separation and this holiness. But the example of Jesus is the opposite. Because of his holiness, he was able to enter in with people that, for lack of a better term, weren't holy. The first century Jewish culture, he communed with so many people that were considered very unholy, and it never bothered him. And I think that's what I want to do as a Christian, like your aunt. Like I don't want to be a Christian to like have this pious life where I feel great. I want to be a Christian so that I have the strength of character and the conviction to go out and serve and help people.
Mm-hmm.
And I that means it's going to be messy and it's going to be dirty and there's going to be questions and you're going to have disagreements. But your relationship with Christ should give you the strength to be okay with that. And I think that
Amen.
I think that a lot of times you and I, for the most part, agree on a lot of things, but some of the disagreements we have, it's okay that we disagree on it because we both know that ultimately it doesn't really matter if we get some things right or some things wrong,
Mm-hmm.
because we're gonna get some things wrong. So we can just go, okay, this is something we disagree on, and we can have more conversations if it comes up, but we can just go out and serve and help people, and they don't have to be holy themselves or ascribe to the quote-unquote right theology for us to help them. Jesus didn't go out to people and go, do you believe what I do? Okay,
Right.
now I can help you.
Right.
He just, I will help you.
That's a great point.
And so I think that that's at least a part, if not a big part, of what I want this to be. Is even if you're not a Christian, I hope there's some things that people can find in this when they're dealing with depression, anxiety, impulse control issues. Those are the three I deal with. Addiction, whatever it is, that they can go, okay, I might not agree with the Christian stuff, but I identify with wanting to eat too much food or being super depressed or not wanting to go into social situations because of anxiety, or I drink too much or I do too many drugs, and be able to take that away, because even if we're not Christians, we're still humans.
Right.
So you can identify, hopefully people can identify with some things that we're saying, and if they don't like some of the other things, they can just disregard it, but they can still get some benefit and some support.
I have found that I am more attracted to people who are messy and screwed up.
Sure.
And because I can relate to them.
Sure.
Because I can see that they've got a deepness to their soul. Not to say that people that don't struggle, which I'm very, very reluctant to even say that there's people out there that don't struggle.
Right.
It's just some people I think are a little bit more vulnerable
Sure.
in their willingness to share that they are hurting, that they're having issues. And growing up living in Minnesota, it's kind of a different place because people are a little bit more guarded.
Oh yeah.
And you don't. Oh yeah. And you don't have. Hey, how are you doing? Oh, great. How are you doing? And so you have a lot of this surface talk.
Yep.
But when you start talking about actually serving people as a follower of Christ, I think that's spot on. To do that, to be able to serve them, you need to know that they need to know that they're safe with you and you're safe with them.
Yeah.
And so that they are willing to share a little bit more about themselves. And one of the things I think that we're both pretty good at is we can go into a room and we can kind of tell.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a gift that God's blessed us with, is we can kind of see that. So I love what you said. I think we should probably maybe just end with a prayer.
All right.
And we can just finish up, and we'll see you guys next week.
Sweet.
Dear Lord, thank you so much for this beautiful morning. The sun's out, the birds are chirping, the cars are driving by.
The Cardinals.
The Cardinals. We thank you for the summer air and the green trees. We thank you for friendship. We thank you that you have put polarity into the world. We thank you for the ability to be able to experience pain. We thank you for the ability to experience joy. And we thank you for the opportunity to live between those 2 points. We ask that you just watch over us. We ask that you watch over anybody that happens to be listening to our show. We ask that you bless their lives and that you circumvent all of the things that might be barriers and challenges in their hearts, so you can just root down to the deepest parts of their soul, so that when they do breathe in, Lord, that they do breathe in your presence. We ask that you fill their lives. We fill our lives with your presence as we go throughout our day, throughout our week. We ask that you look over all the ones that we love. We ask that you give us the opportunity to identify ways that we might be able to reach out of our comfort zones and be able to serve others in ways that might be a little uncomfortable. But we're going to do it anyways, Lord, because we're all human. We all live on your earth, and your kingdom is a celebration. Your kingdom is a party, Lord. You are our King. You are our Father. You are our friend. You are our mentor. You are our light. May we follow you, and may you continue to show us ways that we might be able to serve you. Amen.
Amen. Sweet, man.
That was good.